present. I have a motion for adoption of the agenda. I have a motion, Commissioner Martin, do I hear a second? Second. Commissioner Moore. All right, all those in favor? Aye. 5-0. If we have any petitions from the public?
No, sir.
Okay, moving on. Approval of the minutes from the regular meeting held February 27th. I think y'all had that in a separate email. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second. All right, motion approved and second. Any further discussion and comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 5-0. Constitutional officers. I see one. Raise their hand. Come on up to the Barfield.
I won't take but a minute.
You want another truck?
Actually, it won't be long.
That one pretty,
It does look nice. Thank you very much. Mike Connor finished the sign up on it yesterday, and, he's gonna work on replacing the other one for us, cause it's starting to peel off. Maybe that'll get us by another year or two. Thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to go on and get that through. I just wanna say thank you to a couple of people. First is Clay and his crew. I've been meaning to do this the last few times I've been up here, and, they have really picked up and started keeping the annex looking much nicer, and, I wanted to thank him publicly. And also the sheriff, he's working with me on getting some, active shooter training. We were gonna do it April the 10th, and, we're gonna close the office that morning, myself and Lisa. I'm not sure if, the Board of County Commissioners office is going to or not, but we will advertise it, to do the training. I just feel like would be a good thing for my staff and for the public as well. We just need to be prepared in case something does happen, and I wanted to thank the sheriff and David for working with me, trying to get a date to get that arranged. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson.
I would echo that. I've been in here several days, and, Clay, your staff has been doing a very good job in here several mornings. You've got a good drill sergeant in here making sure that. All right, Sheriff?
Nothing this morning, thank you.
All right. Consent agenda, motion.
Motion. Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second for the consent agenda to be adopted. All those in favor?
Aye.
Same sign, 5-0. Unfinished business, we have the status of agreement between Madison County and the City of Madison for the building official and the inspector services. Rick, come forward.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I do have a copy of the interlocal agreement that was proposed for everybody. You seen that? Thank you. We're around to Cheryl. The interlocal agreement was approved by the city commission last night. And I'm here to entertain any questions that you have, but to let you know that we're gonna come to you again on the 27th, seeking your approval for this interlocal agreement to enter into it with the hope of beginning the services on April 1st. Are you familiar with the terms of the interlocal agreement? You want me to take you through them?
I think if you would.
Okay, very quickly, we're gonna provide building inspection services. My department is gonna begin to do for the city everything it's been doing for the county. All the phone calls regarding permits and questions that people have that could be about that or related things, as they say, and we'll answer the phone. Do all permitting, do all the building code inspections, and help people fix things that don't pass. Issue COs and CCs as they're necessary. And all those related things, talk to people about projects that they want to entertain in town, like out of the country club, and things like that. We are also gonna help the city with some inspections to help them clean up things in the city. They've got some, what might be considered nuisance buildings, and they want our assistance in determining whether they're really structurally sound or not, and we're gonna do that for them. City is gonna pay the county $2,500 a month for that. which, like I said, was agreed to. What we are going to do, for them is keep track of all the permits that we do and everything like that. We will issue them a bill monthly for the $2,500. We will, send them a check every month for the permit fees that we collect for the revenue for the city permits, back to them each month as well. I think it's a real good deal for us and a real good deal for the city. That's really the nuts and bolts of it. Do y'all have any other questions? Mr. Weiss, you got anything you wanna add to that?
Just a couple of things, Rick, if you don't mind.
Please do.
Morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to thank, Rick for working collaboratively with the city. We were to, hammer through the agreement, had a few things that we wanted to talk about to make sure that they were grammatically correct, and we did that. And thanks to the attorney, Mr. Clayton, that you were in, of course, last night, Ms. Reeves was there. We would get that through, and it takes us up until the 1st of October. What will happen is, my hope is that we'll continue to search for a part-time building inspector. And should we not be able to find one, then the agreement will probably continue in its current form. But we'll wait and see what happens in the meantime. So thanks to you and the county, and thanks to Rick for the hard work, we will get that done. And of course, the date was the date that was put on the table for the last meeting to make sure that we would get it done, so we will get that done. So with that, thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you, Rick.
Mr. Chairman, I think if you probably need to go ahead and instruct the building department to keep going the way we've been going, so that y'all can put that agreement on the notice on the next meeting.
Right.
I think,
So we need time to read it and.
That's right.
And vote on it.
That's right.
Okay.
We're continuing on, and we're preparing in hopes that this will be done, so we'll be ready for it when it happens.
You will. Thank you very much, Rick. All right, well, agenda this for next meeting. All right, under new business, the public hearing for the exceptional application for the Madison Country Club. Public Works, I'm sorry, I didn't skip Public Works, I apologize. Approval for the speed bumps for the southwest, Bentley Street, Commissioner Martin, you want to?
Yeah, everything has been done, the application's been done, and I turned it in, Ms. Pickles and she'll do it, so all we need to, do is approve it, and that'll be my motion.
Second. All right, have a motion and a second to approve the speed bumps for Bentley Street. Any further discussion?
I got one concern, Mr. Chairman, I don't project the speed bumps, but the design that we use, I know in some places there's a wide strip. Is that the same design that we want to go by, or just that little small narrow strip?
I was thinking Lonnie's back there, I like the speed humps.
Yes, sir, we'll do the
That's-
speed hump instead of.
The hump.
Yeah, instead of-
Yeah,
Speed hump, that's all.
Yeah, they'll be wide.
The wide one.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right, any other comments, discussion? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That's fine. All right, now we'll move on to new business. The public hearing for the exception of the application for the Madison Country Club RV park. Who's gonna be addressing that?
I'll start off.
Okay.
There was an application submitted to Renee as county planner for a special exception. This would be for a proposed RV resort at the Madison County Country Club. The property, the land use on that property is currently residential 1, and RV parks are not an allowable use under that designation. So because of that, that's the need for applying for the special exception. Should you choose to approve this application, that would not change the land use. That would just grant Mr. Faircloth and the country club the ability to do the RV resort there on that property. It was scheduled for 2 public hearings, the first of which went before planning and zoning at their regular meeting last week. And their motion was to recommend to the Board of County Commissioners to approve the special exception application, subject to any buffering and site plan requirements for access.
That'd be my motion.
Yeah, well, but we'll, I think, would anybody in the audience like to come and address us on this, proposal? Mr. Fairclough,
Yes, sir.
come forward.
I just want to quickly tell you that from my first meeting with Brian Kaufman and my subsequent working in and out of your planning and zoning meeting, or your meetings in your office, you have some of the kindest and the most inviting folks that I've ever dealt with. They want, the attitude was, we want you here, we want you to do it right, but we want you to, we want you to continue what you've done in Madison County. But I know in some places you hear stories about not feeling, about being very welcome to have projects come forward, and they, from day one. So I want to thank you for that, and publicly tell them I appreciate the way they treat us.
Well, thank you very much. I would ask, Ms. Petty, if we heard any complaints or anything from the neighbors over Country Club Estates?
Renee only listed a couple of people. I don't know if she's talked with more people than this. There were only a couple of people, and neither one of them were opposed to it. Now, I'm not sure who may have signed in at the Planning and Zoning Board meeting. I think I saw Jeannie here. She could probably tell you more about what happened at that meeting, which was the first public hearing for this.
Did y'all want me
I would
Yeah.
like to.
Yeah, I'd like Jeannie, if
Okay,
you
you
come
want me
forward,
to come up or just?
if you would.
Alright, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, so we had the public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Board. We had a couple of people, I think there were two that actually signed in that lived on Country Club Estates Road. And their main concern was noise or access. So they, once they were reassured that nobody was gonna be coming through their neighborhood, they had mentioned some additional buffering, but according to the site plan, there's like 600 feet of wooded buffer between where the area that they're gonna be and the property line of the Country Club Estates property. So, as far as any additional buffering, that's probably gonna be up to Mr. Fairclough to make it nice for his actual RV park. But yeah, so this doesn't even show, if you go north on that property, the top of it, that little hatched area is where the RV park is gonna be, and then it probably stops at the property line, which is, when I measured it out, it's about 500, it's between 500 and 600 feet, depending on where you measure it from before you even get to the property line. So there's a lot of wooded property there. So, it's pretty secluded as far as that goes. So they were concerned about maybe some noise or people using golf carts to drive around and get back into their property somehow. But, so they're happy with what Mr. Fairclough is doing, and, so they were in support of it.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if Mr. President would ask questions now or during
Sure,
discussion.
sure, we can, that's.
I did get a couple of phone calls from folks that live out there, and they're not opposing the project, or they don't oppose it, but they would just like some reassurance of the buffering. And
Right.
They're asking for a 250 to 300 foot buffer,
Right.
and, I don't know if that needs to be done in the form of a setback. And Brian and I talked a few minutes ago, and he's well aware of, the conversations, and, as you know, in the future, should this property sell, if Mr. Fairclough sells it, those neighbors just want the assurance that a future buyer comes in and develops all the way out to the property line. And they just said they felt like that if they had something in the development regulations or some setback off the property line, I know in the agriculture business, now you have to have a setback of 250, 300 foot for, certain ag bit, proposals to go in. And I think that may be appropriate here. I know there's a lot of, woodland and wetland back there that would be a challenge for somebody to develop all the way out to that property line, but I think, those property owners that I've talked to feel more comfortable if that does happen.
And that could be, we had brought that up in the Planning and Zoning Board meeting, that the commissioners, in granting the special exception, can make it subject to. So, subject to a 200-foot buffer or whatever from the property line. I mean, you can put any kind of conditions that you want in there to grant that special exception. So those are all things that in granting that, you can make those conditions of the special exception. Also, the way, which was reassuring to the people that attended, and just to clarify, special exceptions, like Sherilyn had said, don't change the land use. It's just allowing them to do that. So if he sells the country club, and for some reason then that RV park is not operated as an RV park for over a year, it just reverts back to residential. So, I mean, it stays residential, the country club is an allowable use in residential, the RV park is not. So as long as it continues to operate as an RV park, it can stay that way. But what he has submitted is all you're giving him the special exception for. If he ever wants to enlarge it or anything like that, that would have to come back before the board. So he's just, you're just allowing him to do what he has requested with any conditions that you want to put on it. And if anything ever changes, it has to come back to the board. He can't just decide to keep expanding it. Or if he sells it and somebody wants to do that, they would have to come back before y'all also.
Well, Jenny, I wanted to ask that question. We're granting an exception to the Madison Country Club owned by Mr. Fairclough. Should a new owner come, wouldn't they have to come through the same process he's doing right now?
Well,
Or would he?
That's kind of, once it's granted, it's sort of, it's granted,
Okay.
yes, sir.
It wouldn't change.
As long as it doesn't change it.
It would not change with the.
Right.
Okay.
I think what, Ms. Bass was talking about though is, if for some reason it wasn't operated as an RV
Yeah.
park for a certain amount of time, it doesn't matter who owns it, they can be the same
It would
ownership,
revert.
the special exception would be lost.
Okay.
So, when y'all, I think, Ms. Davis, what you were talking about, if you wanna put those kind of restrictions on it, what you need to do is, make a motion to approve subject to the following restrictions, and then list those out. And you can do that in the form of a certain number of feet buffer from the property line, or you could just say to, as shown in whatever this drawing, yeah, that it would not be increased beyond what's in this drawing without coming back for another special exception. You know, that would be another way to approach it.
Can I speak?
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Harris, you do.
So when we purchased the golf course, I think 2013, and this is in a document, and I don't have it with me today, but it was done at Judge Browning's office. I don't know exactly who did that. But anyway, we gave them a 250, there was already a 250-foot buffer. So it goes from the property line to actually, there's a fence and a gate. And some of those residents use that access on their golf carts to come play golf. So we told them that we would still honor that. Because there was a resident that said, well, are you gonna fence it up because we can't get through? And I was like, no, we won't do that. We'll leave it open. We're gonna put some nice landscape hedging along the buffer line so 250 feet onto our property to give a nice barrier there, which will take care of any sound if there was. And then I'm gonna work with one of the residents there, Jim, to get the gate back functioning so that we can actually lock that gate, and the residents from Country Club Estates will only have access in the code to it. So you won't be able to leave the campground and go into their neighborhood on a golf cart or whatever. So we're very happy to do that, 250 feet from the property line. That'll solve a lot of problems that we might, because some of the residents back there have built things on our property, and we're gonna work with them individually. And then the other thing that I told them, and you may remember, if we ever sell it, and we have no intentions if this project goes through to do that, I would go to them and say, do you want to buy that buffer? Do you want to own it as a Country Club Estates or as individuals? And then they're protected, forever. Right now that we can't do that because there's a lot of things that would have to go into that, but we certainly will give them 250 easily and with no heartburn. Because they've got it anyway, it's already there. Yes, sir.
I guess, Mr. Chair, the only other question I had was, in the plans that were called for individual metering of the spots, is there a reason, a purpose for individual electrical metering of each spot? Or I thought they would just pay like a daily or a weekly lease or rent on the space? And how permanent does that make that RV there?
Well, the individual metering allows, so it's common in campgrounds, the one that's here in Madison and other ones around the country, that if you stay for one night or 2 nights or 3 weeks, you pay your electricity bill. If you're gonna stay for a month or 2 months, then, you know, that is read and paid in that form. So it's just commonplace to have you responsible for your electricity, generally over a month, but it depends on, you know, individual park owners. And to answer the other part, we don't intend for this to be a full-time residential trailer park location. I mean, these are gonna be people that come in, they may stay one night, they may stay 3 or 4 months if they're from the Northeast and they wanna get out of the snow, but we don't intend for this to be a full-time, you know, there's a big difference in an RV resort and what some people may think we're doing, but this is a temporary passage.
If you want to see, Jim Cajun Madison, if you want to see, and unfortunately the name RV Resort came up, go down to Williston, look at what they've done. The city about the same size as Madison has a tremendous asset.
Okay. Any other comments? Vote. Commissioner Davis, you had
No, that was the only questions that I was asked to bring forward.
you want.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion to grant the request, especially exception request.
What's the condition of the 250-foot buffer?
Yeah, he said that he would,
Yeah.
put in that additional buffer. Is that,
If we
that's my
could-
understanding, right?
It is, and I told one of the residents, that if we can even go another, you know, we can give them another 50 feet in lieu, but 250 is what we're comfortable with, because of the lay of the land and how we have to square it up. So yes, we're 250 is,
Okay.
and we're gonna make it, we'll make it very noticeable, very defined, and they were happy with what I told them at that meeting, so we'll honor that.
Okay.
Ms.
With
Pickles.
250?
Yes.
I'm gonna ask Ms. Pickles to read the resolution.
The recommendation.
Recommendation, excuse me.
The P and Z recommendation was for the Board of County Commissioners to approve the special exception, subject to any buffering and site plan requirements for access.
Okay, that's my motion.
Well, I think that goes.
Yeah, that covers it.
That's second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to, allow the, land use change for the Madison County Country Club.
Special exception, not land
Special
use.
exception, excuse me, special
So-
exception.
Just I want to clarify, does that motion mean when their recommendation subject to buffering, our approval will be based on a 250-foot buffering zone? Is that what you're?
Their, P and Z's recommendation did not specify a specific number, it just said buffering.
Right. I
So
understand.
if
That's
you're
what we
wanting
need to
to include the
clarify.
two hundred and
I think we
fifty,
need
you
to
would
have-
need to specify that.
Yeah, I agree that we need to specify the number and.
I'm just asking. the
Well, I
commissioner if
understand,
that's
but
his-
there's, looking at the layout of the area, and I've talked with some of the residents of the area, and they support, you know, what you're trying to do there. But if you're willing to go ahead and do that additional footage on the buffering, I just would that be part of the motion?
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
I would rather do that because it allows me to tell the builders and the survey folks, and everything, this is what we have to work within.
Right.
Don't cross this boundary and we're done.
Yeah.
And that way, we don't have to come out and go, we're sorry, we made a mistake. It's very defined. Don't get within 250 feet of that neighborhood. And I don't wanna be that close anyway, but I'm comfortable that we can make it work.
Okay, so you're comfortable with the 250?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right.
So that's part
That's
of
part of the motion.
Part of the motion, and you have a second?
Yes.
Can I restate the motion? real quick?
Yes.
Make sure I'm clear? Approve the special exception application subject to a 250-foot buffer and any site plan requirements for access.
I think it's subject to a 250-foot buffer from from neighboring property lines. And then I think if you're going to put a site plan requirement, you'll need to set out what site plan requirement. If you don't put in a site plan requirement, there wouldn't be any additional site plan requirements. I don't think anybody's discussed any thus far, but, you know, you're certainly free to put that in.
Well, that wasn't part of the recommendation from the P and Z board,
Site plan requirement was part of the
or
recommendation.
was.
Yeah, site plan.
I think that's just whatever is already in the,
For access.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't that, did you read that? I thought I heard you put in site plan.
Their wording was site plan requirements for access.
Okay.
Okay, once and for all, that'll be my motion. Follow the P and Z board recommendation.
With the 250-foot buffer.
Right.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign, 5-0. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fairclough.
Okay, thank you very much, and again, I appreciate the way we've been treated on this project.
I appreciate it. All right, moving down to number 2, the resolution for defining continuing the repetitive spills from raw sewage into the Withlacoochee River and Mud Creek by the city of Valdosta to be unacceptable and intolerable. Let me just say, I addressed the city commission last night, Mayor Catron and the city manager here. We got a vote from the city of Madison, 4-0, last night to join us in this resolution. And so with that, I'll open it up to others.
Mr. Chair, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I will be going to the city of, Greenville tomorrow night to get their support on this resolution also.
I believe that, I guess we could do that in part of the discussion, but, it would be my motion to adopt resolution 2019-0313.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt, 2313, excuse me, 313, 2019. Any other discussion?
Yes, this resolution, Sherilyn and Brian and others, utilize the one that the task force adopted last week, that y'all approved me to vote yes on at the last meeting. We just added in a few other things that we would like to see happen for Madison County, one being a timely notification of an event and a few other things. And I think the intent too is, I've already contacted the town of Lee, they're gonna actually adopt a form of this resolution, either this resolution or they may make a few tweaks of their own. And I think the intent was to the other cities, if they would, to adopt a resolution, or I guess this resolution. So, anyway.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? Have a motion, to, accept this, we have a motion.
We already have.
got a motion.
Second, all right, we're good. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, 5-0. The, presentation of the 2015 water use estimates and upcoming water supply planning activities. Mr. Ben Glass, Swanee River, I think we have 2 or 3 individuals.
We do, Mr. Chair, and I'm actually here just in support, so if it's all right with you, I'm gonna let our water supply planner, Amy Brown, do the presentation.
All right, let's step forward, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Sir, are you gonna be advancing the slides?
I can.
Okay. So good morning, my name is Amy Brown. I'm water supply planner for the Swanee River Water Management District, and this is an information item just to let you know where we are with water supply planning for Madison County, and then I'll just touch on the district as a whole and what kind of upcoming activities we have. One of the things that I submitted in advance to you was this kind of Madison County fact sheet. What we're trying to do right now is we're just trying to get eyes on our water use estimates for 2015. So this is something that came out in advance, and just we're seeking input on anything that, any observations that people might have. If there are permits that we're representing as active water users that are no longer active, that's the type of feedback that we're seeking for that. So as you're able to take a look at that sheet, please let me know if you have any feedback. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide there. So the Swanee River Water Management District has 4 core mission areas: water supply, water quality, flood protection, and natural systems. So my role in the district is water supply planning, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to get the best possible estimates of current use and projections of future use, So we can use that data to inform people who are doing planning for the region, and also to inform the people who are making decisions on permits, and to use that information to compare to what kind of flow constraints there might be for natural systems in the area. So on the previous slide, you can see Madison Blue Spring, that's the outstanding Florida spring that we have for Madison County, and certainly we wanna make sure that we're protecting that. So we've got, our charge, as I discussed, was to make sure we have a sustainable supply of water, both for people and the environment. The foundation of that is getting good estimates of water use, and so that's where we're coming to just share with you what we have for our 2015 estimates of water use and what's gonna be coming up in terms of planning and projections. Going forward from 2015, we will be providing annual estimates of water use that you can use as you're kind of trying to look at your county and projections and growth management, things like that. So last year, we accepted a water supply assessment, and that was in 2018, and there was a recommendation for regional planning. So on this map here, we now have 2 planning regions. There's one on the eastern side, that's Hamilton, Suwannee, Columbia, Union, Bradford, Alachua, and Gilchrist. That's a current active planning region that we have. We plan there jointly with the St. Johns River Water Management District to ensure a sustainable water supply. One of the recommendations in the water supply assessment that was approved last year was that we initiate regional planning west of the Suwannee and with Lacoochee rivers, and then into Levy County. And that would be doing the same activities, looking at projected growth, how much water demand that growth comes with, and then making sure there's sufficient supplies. If there's not sufficient supplies, that's when you would initiate projects. So on the next slide, we have the projected growth for this area. We're right about 19,200 people in Madison County right now. And on the next slide, we have the estimated water use associated with that growth. And so we're at about 24 million gallons per day of water use that's estimated in Madison County. So about 24 million gallons per day. So we go to the next slide. This kind of shows the distribution of that water use. You can see that similar to most of the counties that are west of the Suwannee with Lacoochee, agriculture is a dominant water use in this district, or in this county. It's about 20 million gallons per day of water use that is for the agricultural industry. And then in addition to that, there is livestock irrigation. Right now we have it split out. There's the water irrigation, water to grow crops, and then also the water that goes to, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have values there. There are percentages associated with that show up on my slide. So it's about 82% agricultural, about 4% livestock, which is that pink section there. Moving your way around the pie to the blue section, that's your domestic self-supply. That's about 4% also. And then going, the next one over is landscape and recreational irrigation. That's your ball fields, golf courses, things like that. That's about 1%. The gray is the commercial, industrial, institutional, mining, and dewatering. And so that in this area would be, Nestle would be the dominant water supply user in that group. That's about 4%. And then your public supply is about 5%. So that kind of shows the distribution of water use that is happening in the county right now. This is just to kind of give you a reference for comparison. So this is the district-wide water use. So you can see that agriculture is still the dominant water user, but maybe not quite as much. We have 2 large industrial users, which is that gray section in other counties that make up a good portion of the water use for that sector. But the distribution of water use in Madison County is pretty consistent with what most of our district sees in terms of water use. And we can compare that again to the statewide estimates on the next slide. Oh. Okay, well, there's a statewide estimate on the next slide that didn't make it through for whatever reason. I'm sorry about that. But what it's showing, and the point I want to make, is that when you look at the state of Florida as a whole, their water use is more than half public supply. So most of the state of Florida is putting most of their water towards public supply uses. And so when we start to talk about doing projects and what types of projects we would want to bring online, in our district, a lot of that is focused on agricultural cost share and that conservation efforts, because that's our biggest chunk of water use. In other districts, they might focus on putting reclaimed water from public supply towards a beneficial use, and that's certainly something that we look at as well. But if you think of the relative magnitude of the water in the different sectors, we need to focus more on making sure that we're getting as much efficiency as we can out of agriculture, and less focus in our district would be on big public supply projects, because that's just not our dominant use at this point in time. So in terms of next steps, we're going to be finalizing our water use estimates for the district. And then we're going to be developing projections going forward to look at how much growth we're anticipating. those estimates of 15 use and those projections are gonna be used as we set minimum flows and minimum levels. Those will be on the Swanee, the Santa Fe, the Steinhatchee, and then also for those existing priority water bodies like Madison Blue Spring that have minimum flows set, we would be using those estimates to do evaluations of those priority water bodies. Once we get our projected demands, we're gonna compare those projections to the available resources, the needs of the resources to ensure a sustainable water supply. And we would be looking at projects, if there's a problem, we're meeting the projected demands and sustaining the natural resources is a challenge, and we would be looking at what projects we could bring online to provide alternative water supplies, to increase conservation, to make sure that both are getting the water they need. So this image right here, I just wanna make you aware, so in terms of growth projections, we haven't fully projected our estimates of future water use, but for agriculture specifically, we are getting that information from the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. There's a concerted statewide effort to get us good estimates of current use and projections of future use, based on crop type, based on economics and all these other factors. And so I wanna make you aware that there are already growth projections available for Madison County through the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. We will be using those projections. And so what they're showing us is we're at about 20,000 irrigated acres in Madison County for 2016. That is projected to grow to about 26,000 irrigated acres by 2040, based on the economic models that they're looking at. So there is about a 6,000 acre projected increase in irrigated acreage for this county based on the models that they're running. And so that would translate to about an 8 MGD, 8 million gallon per day increase in water demand if this growth occurs as it is projected to grow. And so that's the information that we will be using as the basis for our planning going forward. And so this is an illustration, again, this is from the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. This is a report that they update annually. The left-hand side of that graph is showing their estimate of where irrigation is occurring as of 2016. The right-hand side of this, the yellow that's showing up there, so there's the pink is the irrigated acreage. The yellow that's showing up on the right-hand side image is the types of lands that they are projecting would increase in irrigation. So not that specific plot, but that type of plot is the type of plot that they're projecting would see increased irrigation if the economic models that they're projecting bear fruit and they move forward as projected. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Have a question on it? Yes, ma'am.
Well, my name is Cynthia Dell Langston, and I do have a question for the Water Management District, and it is, several years ago, our community was bombarded with pivot irrigation, over irrigation into our communities. They were fumigating and irrigating into our communities, and we started a campaign addressing this misuse of the deep well permits. They are bound by best management practices to follow that when they irrigate, their irrigation cannot go outside their targeted crop. And this is happening throughout Madison. So what I want to know is, how is Swanee River Water Management addressing pivot overspread? Because it happens constantly. And if they do not enforce their policies regarding best management practices, how is that going to impact us in the future?